Welcome to Market Pulse Pros and Pioneers. Each week, I talk with industry leaders on both marketing and entrepreneurship and business to find out all about their wins and failures in marketing right now. We'll hear all about successes and wins and what's fallen flat so that you can take that knowledge and implement it. Learn from the best, from the folks who've been there and done it all, as well as people just like you. Thanks for joining us. This is Market Pulse Pros and Pioneers.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Market Pulse Pros and Pioneers, where this week we're talking to a Guinness World Record holder, Andy Stone. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Good to be here.
Amazing. I can confirm you're definitely our very first world record holder on the show, and to
Oh,
my knowledge, anyway, to the best of my knowledge.
privilege.
Absolute honour to have you on the show. So, for the people at home, Andy is not just a Guinness World Record holder, but he's an ultra endurance athlete and a motivational speaker on a mission to help people harness their neurodiversity as a superpower. After years of struggling with ADHD, autism, and addiction, Andy's turned his life around, achieving sobriety and pushing his mind and body to new limits. And in 2022, he completed 70 half Ironman triathlons. I can't even talk today. In 75 days. So not even just completing 70 half Ironman triathlons on its own, but doing that within 75 days. And that's how he set a world record, covering the equivalent distance from London to Beijing. That is unreal. He's now training for his next challenge, which is to become the first person to swim the Atlantic. And Andy shares his story through speaking engagements, inspiring others to embrace resilience, break limiting beliefs, and unlock their full potential. I don't even know where to begin with all of that, Andy. That is a phenomenal bio and probably one of the most impressive bios that I've had to read out for the show. So,
To be honest, I feel a little bit pressured.
you're intimidated by yourself, but it's a fantastic story. And
Thank you.
in line with our partners for the show being ADHD Liberty, you know, neurodiversity and ADHD and autism are all things that are very central to my life at the moment. Things that I'm very passionate about, helping people to understand more of. So when I got the opportunity to talk to yourself, it's a no-brainer for me that we should have you on the show and share your journey and story as well. Before we get into where you're at right now, I just want to come right back to the beginning, to your school and your childhood. What was that like, living at a point before you were diagnosed officially? What were the things that people might recognize from their own childhood that kind of gives them an idea as to indications or symptoms?
Yes, that's a good question. I was the typical sort of naughty boy, the boisterous boy. Mum and dad kind of recognized kind of some of the symptoms fairly early on, so kind of primary school age, and they did everything that they could to keep me away from things like ultra-processed food. Obviously, it wasn't called that at the time, but it was just numbers, colorings, flavorings, preservatives. They noticed immediately that as soon as that went into my system, I would just become incredibly hyperactive, disruptive. So they did everything they could to shield me from that. And then obviously you get a bit older, you get to high school age and you get a bit of pocket money, you can go to the shop, the touch school, whatever. And then I was unable then to kind of control those kind of cravings, and stick me in a 2-hour maths lesson after a 10p MIPS, and there was just no chance. But it became more and more disruptive. I became more and more kind of fearful in the classroom. I got expelled from the local comp. I was then sent to a grammar school. I think Mum and Dad probably remortgaged the house for the fees, but they just made the smaller classes, better results, all of that. But of course, it just continued. I then kind of halfway through grammar school got a diagnosis for ADHD privately. But even at the time, this would have been around 95, 96. There was very little known about it. So even with a diagnosis, it's not like it is now where you can then go away and research it. The behaviours and the symptoms still kind of carried on very much into my sort of late teens and 20s. But yeah, it was difficult, and not knowing what was happening, that was a real problem for me. I couldn't understand why I was getting sent out of the class again. Why am I in detention again? Why am I getting expelled? And it was a very repeating pattern, but with no answers. So very frustrating.
And I guess you kind of get used to being labelled as, you described it perfectly at the beginning, right? The naughty boy. You get used to being described as that way. And I'm guessing you start to almost believe that and play into that at times as well, because why not? Everybody believes it of me and I'm trying my best. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was cases where if like things would go wrong at school, where was Andrew? It was the first thing for the teacher to consider, right, where's the guilty party at? And it was considered me, like it was guilty till proven innocent. And then, yeah, I think that's why there is potentially such a high prison rate for ADHD is because you do get to the point where you think, do you know what? And then, yeah, you play the role and you step over that line and the judicial system gets involved and you're in trouble.
I think there's also that combined with the traits of a lack of respect for authority, a natural rebellious attitude. So I didn't so much struggle with that. I kind of did a little bit at school, but more when I got into the corporate environment. I was always that guy who just wasn't doing as he was told because I haven't explained it in a way where I understand it, where I really buy into what you're doing. And I don't think anybody talked about ADHD or neurodiversity in any way, shape, or form the entire 15 years I was in corporate life. Not once. So I do totally get where you're coming from. But that obviously then, despite the diagnosis, that still escalated into addiction, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it kind of, in the teens, yeah, discovered nightclubs, girls, ecstasy, cannabis, speed, ketamine, magic mushrooms, you name it. And I just kind of thought that was like a coming of age. That was kind of what you do when you discover clubs and you go off. And what I was actually doing was learning all the amazing ways illicit drugs can help you to escape from your problems. Like I'd moved out from home during the time of my GCSEs. Home life had become very difficult. And yeah, from the age of 16 to now, so that's 25, 26 years, I've had 63 jobs because it's been so reminiscent of school and that kind of whole similar scenario that I was terrified of classrooms. And yet a lot of my jobs are now cherry picked to be outdoors, to be in nature, to be teamwork and all this sort of stuff that I can use as a coping strategy for employment.
I mean, I guess at the height of your addiction, you realized that things needed to change, right? There comes a turning point for everybody where you realize enough and you've got to find a way to either get out of that situation and make the right choices, or you're going to go down the path and there's not really much coming back once you're down that path. What was the turning point for you?
So I kind of progressed through my 20s and into my early 30s, and specifically alcohol for me was the overriding sort of drug of choice. And it just progressed and dosage went up and life was becoming more and more difficult. Couldn't hold a job down. My absolute best mate on planet Earth, who was my wife by then, I was married at 25, was very straight-laced and down the line. She was a fantastic influence on me. And we just started to grow apart. So I moved out. We discussed divorce at this point, and the whole victim mindset was just setting in conjunction with chronic alcohol abuse. And it, to the point where it took my mum and dad to sit me down to kind of say, Andrew, we believe you need rehab. And it was a whole family intervention. And then it kind of blew up like, no, I don't. You drink if you want my problems, and all of that kind of angry chimp mentality. And I then went off on a 48-hour bender and kind of thought, you know what, maybe I do need rehab. And this is the point in my life where I think, okay, this is my rock bottom. I've lost my wife, I've lost my house, I had all I had to my name with an 8 grand debt from cocaine and my car and my clothes. I'd lost everything. And that was the point where I thought, you know what, yeah, tried to do dry January, Stoptober, all of these things. I'm not drinking till my birthday. I'm not drinking till Christmas and all of this kind of stuff. And get a few days and you think, oh, that's enough of a detox, isn't it? And all the permissions would come flooding back, and there I was back at the bar again. So yeah, the acceptance I was addicted to the substance of alcohol came residential rehab.
And I think it's fair to say you've got to want to make the change, right? Like it doesn't matter what the external influences are until you're ready to decide to do something different and make that choice. There's not a lot that will shift you from those behaviors. And even then, it's a constant battle. It's never something that kind of just goes, you don't get cured of addiction. And certainly as an ADHD person where your dopamine levels are set so much lower than everybody else's, that's an even harder battle for people to fight. It's definitely an uphill struggle for most.
100%.
What was the point where you realized that you had a way to break through the addiction? You kind of set yourself a target and goal that kind of got you through the rough times.
Yes. I found the first kind of 3 months incredibly difficult, as you would in early recovery. The withdrawal period of kind of finding your feet again, doing the work that's required. And as you said, step 1 in the 12-step program of recovery through it, and step 1 is admitting it. I have got a problem with alcohol. My life is unmanageable. And then from there, kind of the next 18 months, was me trying to sort of piece my life back together. And 18 months, 3 months, things just felt a bit easier. Then at 18 months again, things just felt that easier and life was kind of working for me again and things were coming back together. And my mindset was just reducing. I was able to have, pride and ambition again. And I then went off, became a scuba instructor because I fascinated. One of my hyper focuses is marine biology, the reef, sharks, all of it, love it. As outdoor, lived in a team. I went and I retrained, and unfortunately, COVID was Spanish to that. And I was brought back home, I was repatriated, and I moved in with Sally. And the second lockdown was tough, really tough. I completely stagnated, and I was close. I literally stood up off the sofa to go and get a bottle of gin to relapse. And myself and Sal had a very sort of grown-up conversation, and the project for the world record was born there and then. So I was able to then start training. It was an 18-month project, and it was my hyper-focus for the entire time. It just worked, and yeah, it wasn't flawless. We executed it pretty well. We were happy with the result. In fact,
Wow.
Yeah, nice to have that kind of accolade. All my sort of talent wasn't completely wasted throughout my 20s and sort of late 30s and early 40s. I managed to piece it all back together and still achieve.
That's an amazing accomplishment from going, you've mentioned the highs and lows that you've been through. You said, 65 jobs, but to go from all of that to then completing something that no one else on earth has actually done. That is a phenomenal achievement. How did it feel when you kind of finished that last triathlon, that half Ironman? Special shout out in today's episode for our charity partners, ADHD Liberty, led by Sarah Templeton, who are part of the fight to prevent the school to prison pipeline for ADHD and neurodiverse individuals. If you'd like to find out more, you can visit them. The show links are in the notes below, and I would encourage you to go along and have a look and educate yourself on their fight. It's an incredibly important cause, and we're super proud to have them as charity partners for the Market Pulse Pros and Pioneers podcast. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your episode.
Just the multitude, the amount of different levels that it was achievement on was crazy, because there was like a concept. I haven't achieved anything professionally, particularly personally, until this. Or personally, I could say I got sober, but other than being divorced, this whole kind of escapade of negativity, and there was finally the acceptance that I'd completed something significant in my life. It was the whole ADHD thing. For me, I've very rarely been able to pick my hyper-focus. There's been so many times I've gone, like, this job, it's got this boss, it's got this money, it's got this potential, blah, 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 blah. And then a month in, it wasn't after all. And then again and again. And finally, picked, and it's my hyper-focus. I actually pulled it off, an 18-month project. Oh my God. So there was an element to it. Yes, I finally utilized this skill, gift that ADHD is getting, done it. Amazing. And yeah, there was my family were my team. So my dad was roadside assistance. Mum was like domestic goddess, doing all the food, the kids, the dog, all the housework. And Sal was the integral in all the admin side and innovation, obviously, bless her. And it was a real sort of family across the line as well, if you like. So it was just all of these things. As an addict, you're completely isolated. The prospect of Sal even being interested in me when I was drunk, having the physicality, and in my late 30s was just never going to be an option. Managing to execute it was just, and now I've got it forever. Talk about putting things in your CV. Goggins talks about his cookie jar. And it's there for life. Like, I can never have it taken away,
I must admit, when I initially came across your profile to send out the invite to be a guest on the show, I couldn't be more excited at having the idea of having somebody who is a world record holder on the show. That was before I dug into your story, and what a phenomenal story that is. And
Thanks, mate.
You're still evolving, right? So
yeah,
we've now moved from that. What have you been doing since that triathlon? Because I know we've mentioned at the beginning that you're heading towards the next challenge of swimming the Atlantic. But in terms of a professional career as well, you've pivoted almost completely now that you know yourself a lot better.
I'm now self-employed. I am now a peer mentor, helping individuals one-to-one, going to schools, universities, businesses, and talking exactly what I've been through. So individuals that get an ADHD diagnosis now, whether be it privately or NHS, are still getting no more information than I got in the 90s. So I can go and talk to these people. Have you got a diagnosis? Yes. Do you know what ADHD is? Attention deficit hyperactivity. Yeah, but do you know what it is? No idea. Are you on Ritalin? Do you know what it is? No idea. So now I can go and help these people by educating them on themselves, the anecdotal stuff from me, make myself vulnerable, because that's sometimes what it takes to help people open up. So my name is Andy. It's gone from being, I'm an alcoholic, I'm a drug addict, I'm autistic, I'm ADHD, like, woe is me, to, right, yeah, my name is Andy, I'm an alcoholic, I'm a cocaine addict, I am ADHD and I am on the autism spectrum. And here's what I know about it. Here's what I've been able to achieve by utilizing it. It's gone from, you've got drug addiction and world records. And so that's the night and day for me. So if I can go into these places and teach them about the strength, rather than people just getting hung up on their weaknesses. And so it's things like, for businesses, it's things like helping people with the symptoms, the negative symptoms that come along with it, like poor timekeeping. You know, I'm a bugger for being late, but I have time blindness. I actually really struggle to predict how long things are going to take. So I might be 10 minutes late. Well, then I don't need a lunch hour. If you give me a task that I enjoy, the dopamine just goes ping, and then it's through the roof. And in fact, I resent lunch hours sometimes. Just give me flexi hours. And that's just one way of utilizing an ADHD. It's just letting. And then you hear the story of Bill Gates and his autistic lads that he kept in an office downstairs with no windows, low lighting, nothing in there. It's almost soundproof. People were kind of looking in going, well, and it turns out two autistic lads that millions on firewalls and cyber hacking. And they had a meeting and they brought them out. This is the team. The prospective open office, those guys would have driven them mad. And so it's just trying to help companies and help individuals to know thyself and bring in empathy and, frustration. And that's my goal. I'm doing it on, like I say, on a one-to-one level with mentees. Peer mentoring, I believe, is absolutely fantastic. It's not pretending something I'm not. I can go in and just be completely open. And I believe it.
I think it's phenomenal because I come from a retail background, and I remember commenting at the time, completely unaware that I was ADHD and had autistic traits myself. And I remember commenting, saying in a really positive way, do you know what? I love working with people who are OCD, who show autistic symptoms, who are ADHD, because they've got energy, they've got passion. If you can motivate them and get them to do the stuff that everybody else hates, you will find one of them will want to do that thing, and they'll do it incredibly well. They'll do it faster than anybody else thought was possible. And when they're finished, it'll be immaculately tidy and done. You just find those jobs for people, and you know what their jobs are, and you give them those jobs every time. And they'll go way above and beyond for you. And I remember saying that, but never once, and I've said this loads, I never once, and I don't know anybody else who can say otherwise, that in that environment or any other, that there's any education for leaders and managers on neurodiversity. And I think a lot of the time it's seen as, well, we must tick this box for HR to show that we know what neurodiversity is, and then we can talk about it and we can prove it. And we get a tick box and get a nice sticker for the window for the employer. But it's actually way more important than that, because you're utilizing your best resource. Really? Because almost everybody is neurodiverse in some way, shape, or form. It's maybe a bit contentious for some people, right? But I believe that firmly. And if you can leverage somebody like Andy to educate your workforce so that you can maximize. So I used to get a 60 or 70 hour week done in 40 hours, right? My management hated it because I needed to be there for that 50-hour contract. They expected me to be there for 60 hours or 70 hours, like my peers. And I'd be like, more fool them. I've done what they do in 2 or 3 days. I've done it today in 8 hours, and I'm going home. And I used to get in trouble all the time for leaving early from work because I'm bored, supremely bored. Because I've done everything, guys. I've done it. And like you say, I'd work through my dinner break. I wouldn't bother with proper breaks. I'd just chug an energy drink down, I'd have a bar of chocolate to give me that peak in the middle of the day, and then I'd be back on with things and do it faster than anybody else. So I love the fact that you're going around and educating not just business owners, but universities, schools, on how to overcome that adversity for their neurodiverse employees, students, whoever, or themselves. What's your best advice for somebody who's in that position? They suspect that they might be neurodiverse, but they're not feeling that support from their leadership. How do they influence their leadership to care enough, in
That's a
your
really good
eyes?
question. I think, first of all, you have to know thyself. I have had to go away and in a sober state, understand what was the root cause of my drinking, and it was my neurodiversity, without a doubt. And it's because I was trying to compete with my peers. I was making personal comparisons to my brother, to my spouse, to my mates, and I got very frustrated. In sobriety, I'd been able to understand my own hormones. I always used to think, oh, the hormone, or once a month. How ignorant I was. I am one of the most hormonal people I know. And so to understand myself has been absolutely vital and an integral part of then being able to educate others about me. Because if I don't know myself, how can I do that? And if I can then go to my employer and say, okay, I am autistic, I do have ADHD, here's the drawbacks, but here's the positives. And if you can just work with me, I'm not asking to change much, but here's X, Y, Z that I know works for me personally, and I believe it would help. Neurodiversity, it's 1 in 5 people. It's a massive part of some people's workforces. These small changes can come empathy from above, and understanding, and it may just be that your boss has actually got a neurodiverse individual in their direct family, and working together with in might help them personally. And you may find that by being open about addiction, people come forward all the time about alcohol and drug abuse. And am I drinking too much, Andy? And they'll kind of come on. I understand the aspect of the anonymous side of the fellowship that I'm in, and I have huge respect. But by me actually choosing to be open, it gives people to come forward and talk about it. So I think empathy, I think understanding, I think you'll find that people have a lot of other experiences with this.
The biggest thing that I would recommend on the back of that is, if you're a lead and you're not educated on neurodiversity, rather than worry about all of the ins and outs of it right now, I would highly recommend you go away and look at what the traits are for ADHD and autism. Because there are some very surprisingly obvious traits that even I knew nothing about until about a year or two ago, that now that I know about them are massively obvious. And I should have known if I'd known about those traits years ago, I'd have realized that I was ADHD years ago, and being able to deal with criticism that was leveled my way, advice and feedback that was given with the best of intentions, but wasn't ultimately helpful. And it's things like, I can't stand labels on the back of my clothes. Never have done since I was a kid. Certain types of labels. I think they're a lot better than they used to be, but definitely anything scratchy on my skin, wool, that sort of thing. And it's things that you would never associate with ADHD, because there's quite often sensory traits that are part of the autism tree that are highly correlated with ADHD. So as a leader, if you go away and research those, I bet that you'll start to see them amongst your staff, your employees, your direct reports, or your peers, your management. You'll see it all around you once you start to see it. And with that in mind, you'll be able to give people a little bit more leeway in how you work with them, how you talk to them, how you handle them, what feedback you give to them. And it'll help you get on the pathway where somebody like Andy coming in will massively benefit your business. But a lot of people are out there right now going, I don't have any ADHD employees. Guarantee you do. They're just very good at masking it in a corporate environment. Biggest feedback I ever had was, Paul, why don't you just toe the company line? Because I'm a bloody rebel. I can't help it. That's part of my personality. I'm a rebel, and you're giving me orders and you're not backing it up with proof points. Prove it to me. Show me how it'll benefit me, the customers on my team, then we'll do it. If you don't prove it to me and you're just going to make me do it, I will be your biggest, worst enemy. Believe it. Hence why I'm not in corporate world anymore. So Andy, with that, kind of coming back to that last challenge that you're now aiming towards, swimming the Atlantic. I mean, That is outrageous. What's your training plan for that? When are you going to be doing that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I had an English Channel attempt last year. It's kind of me dipping my foot with the water swimming. I've always been really lucky at swimming. I swam as a kid, swam for the town, loads of galas and training and all of that. So it's one of those things from childhood that sticks with you. And I'm just dead lucky in that respect. Again, it's playing to my strengths. So it's banging my head against a wall, trying to do what I'm bad at. This is finally an opportunity for me to, okay, the record was set in triathlon. Of the 3 triathlon disciplines, it's swimming all day long, which is my greatest strength. Why not try it? So on a family holiday on a plane over the Atlantic. Anyone's ever swum across the Atlantic? And a few people have had a crack. No one has done it officially. So we've spoken to a couple of them unofficially, and their kind of attempts were discarded. So we're now gathering information, all the kind of admin side project is kind of coming together. We're now much at a point where we're after corporate sponsorship. We raise money for John Caldwell for Caldwell Youth, so we're hoping potentially we could try and work again with those guys. It was really well. As for the actual physical training side of things, I'm actually on a break at the minute because of the hours that I put in last year for the channel, all in kind of the British coast. So a lot of cold water conditioning, a lot of hours in the lake with no wetsuit on. So in between sort of 8 and 11 hours a day, 5,000 calorie breakfasts. So for breakfast, I only eat 500 calories of porridge with berries, seeds, nuts, a pint of wholemeal. And then I have a 100-gram trifle, which is another 1,800 calories. And then I drink a pint of cream, which is another 2,800 calories. And then swim for 2 hours. And then every hour on the hour, I drink a amount of liquid, which has powders in it. And it's the equivalent sugar of a whole cheesecake on the hour every hour. So the calorific intake has to be, you have to condition yourself for that. A first world problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just building it all up. So I'll be back to, I'm in the gym a lot. I use a CrossFit gym, so a lot of hit stuff. And then I will slowly build swimming back up again. And hopefully we can sort of tie it all together with corporate sponsorship and it'll all come to fruition. We were initially planning for this year, but we're looking at 2026 now. We've been from Brazil to West Africa, and there's a wind opens up where north and trade winds come across from Africa to the Caribbean side, but there's a channel that opens up that kind of drifts like a giant current that takes across the Atlantic, and it's called the doldrums. So it's hate it because there's no wind, but for swimming it'd be perfect. So we have
so you'd be down in the doldrums.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah,
and learn something else.
Yeah, I just hate it. But there's no benefit to the wind for a swimmer. It just made the whole thing more uncomfortable. Yeah, so we're getting it together. We're quietly optimistic, but it's still a way to go.
If and when you do complete, when you do, I'm confident you will, Andy, knowing
Thanks.
you and having spoken to you a couple of times. When you do, please let me know. I want you back on the show. We want to celebrate that win. And,
Thank you.
You know, as you're building up to it, keep in touch with us. Let us know. We'll do some shout outs on the podcast because I'd love to encourage people to support you in the journey. Yeah. And if there's anybody out there that can help you with that corporate sponsorship, I've got a huge network of amazing people. So please do, if you're watching this and you think you've got somebody who can help, please do get them to reach out to me, reach out to Andy directly. I'll happily connect you because he's such a phenomenal person who's done so much for other people already. So thank you very much for coming along today, Andy. Appreciate you sharing your story. If people want to reach out and learn more, what's the best way for them to reach you?
So they can get me on the website, which is andy-stone.com, or you can get me on the normal socials. Insta is Atlantic Swim Andy or ADHD Mentor Andy. And find me through that, ping me, and I would love to have a chat.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for that. And I'll make sure those links are in the show notes as well.
Perfect.
All right. Take care. Thank you very much. And thanks for watching along. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. And I will share another amazing story with you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us for today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to feature on a future show, or you've got some ideas for folks who would make a great guest, please drop us a line. Contact details are in the show notes, and I'd love to hear from you. Your host today was me, Paul Banks, founder at Javelin Content Management. Here at Javelin, we specialise in helping busy business owners just like you to repurpose video content, taking all the stress and tech problems away and turning your long-form video into literally hundreds of pieces of content without breaking the bank. We describe it as getting ideas out of your head into video and out to your socials. If you want to launch your personal brand, become the vendor of choice for your audience, or maximise your sales revenue impact, we'd love to hear from you. Join us next Wednesday for the next episode, and don't forget to subscribe and give us a review. Our podcast is only possible with your continued support.